So, what I'm going to do is talk about the novel A Little Life. I thought I wasn't going to do this because I thought it was played out. I thought everybody already had heard about it, watched videos, read it, done whatever. Like the discourse cycle is played out. So, I'd actually been working on a video on her novel To Paradise. The problem with that, though, the reason why you're not watching that instead is one, it's 1,200 pages. Um, Two, it required me to get into Henry James so I could truly explain properly Washington Square Yowie, as well as these like pseudo Regency AUs that you see a lot in fan fiction. And thirdly and finally, it's just not good. And so it's kind of a pick two situation typically, where if you can get two out of the three, I'll probably cope and put up with it, but 3 out of 3 was too far. So I thought I was done with Miss Yanagihara. However, when my friend Extine sent me the screenshot of a tweet, I was like, okay, clearly some people still need to hear me talk about it. So the screenshot of the tweet is of, okay, I'm not going to weigh in on this tweet because I know it caused a lot of discourse, but it says, quote, I am once again begging straight writers to stop treating their queer MLM stories and media like little fantasy worlds where you can subject yourself and twink to all your fantasies with violent and abusive men. And it's quote retweeted by somebody saying, is this about a little life? And he was like, no way. And I was like, oh, brother, yes way. So, what I'm going to do is talk about a little life through some notes, quotes, commentary. I'm going to be using Wikipedia summary because I have COVID right now. I do have COVID, and that's kind of cramping my style when it comes to focusing enough to write a good summary with all the relevant plot threads of a novel that is how many pages? Several hundred pages long. So, here we go. A Little Life is about a group of 4 people. They were all college roommates together. They were all just kind of randomly assigned freshman year, and they all really hit it off. Um, so there's JB. JB, early in his career, works as a receptionist at like this Soho magazine in the downtown art scene, and he later becomes a famous artist. He is a black aspiring artist. He comes from a middle class background, which he's somewhat squeamish about. He's somewhat embarrassed about how happy his childhood was because he kind of wants to be tormented. And he begins creating art of his friends, especially Willem and Jude, and he finds Jude the most beautiful. And this leads him to great success because everybody is like, wow, your art of Jude is so beautiful. Jude is so beautiful. And he's like, yeah, I know. He later has a major falling out with Jude because I'll explain that later. Malcolm is the second. He is an architect throughout all this, a kind of minor one to a major one with his own firm. He is also black, but he comes from a wealthy background and he struggles with his father's high standards for him. Like he lives at home at like 27 and his parents are like telling him that he needs to go out there into the real world. Like Jude, for instance, his father loves Jude. Third in the group, we have Willem, and he is genial to the point of sexlessness. Women want him very badly. He is an actor, first struggling and then successful. When he's struggling, he's a waiter. He's white, and he grew up with a poor background, and he has been in unrequited, desperate love with none other than Jude. Then we get to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Jude. The thing you gotta know about him is everybody loves him, except for the people who hate him. He has a leg-related disability, which leaves him in extreme pain a lot of the time. He is an assistant prosecutor in the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office, turned high-profile attorney for civil cases. He does like big pharma and stuff like that, defending big pharma for the record. He is read as white. He's implicitly raised as white, but there are several comments during the novel that nobody knows his ethnicity. This is because of his troubled and mysterious backstory, which we will get to. I should have insert content warnings at this point for intimate partner violence, childhood sexual abuse, and suicide, I guess. I will treat all of those subjects with the respect they deserve, which is a lot, and the book's handling of them with the respect that deserves, which is very little. So I want to comment first on some things that I thought Hanya Yanagihara does really well in the book. There are two things. One, it has a very strong sense of place. She really creates the setting. Um, you really understand this to be Manhattan Yaoi, analogous to the way one time I read this like novel, not novel, volume of it, and it was like Amish Yaoi, and it was like Our Day of Rumspringa or whatever, and it's about like this guy, and he goes on his Rumspringa to like New York, and it's like bizarrely well researched and serious about its premise. That's how I feel about this. Not that it has any Amish people in it, just it has the same vibe of like being yaoi about New York. By the way, I'm not saying that she's Japanese. I'm saying that for reasons that you will very quickly discover as I continue to read this. Um, that's the t-shirt of racism promise. Um, and secondly, the way she tells anecdotes from multiple characters, because this also, like every fucking other thing on here, has a split POV. As the POV rotates around from characters, oftentimes you'll hear the same anecdote twice, but it'll be radically different. Not because they disagree on the facts of it, but because different bits stand out to them in their memories and their recollections and what they thought was important. And something that was character defining for one character was just a little blip for the other. And bits like that I thought were very human and charming, and I appreciate it a lot. Because the POV floats around from the four of them, as well as Jude's surrogate parent, basically to whoever would have the most cutting insight at any point in time. Because these people are mean to each other. They often think very uncharitably to each other, but not in a way I find realistically uncharitable. We'll get to that later. So the novel begins with the four of them looking for an apartment for Willem and Jude, the two white ones who are living together. Yes, they do make a joke about that, but no, it never goes anywhere. Yes, there's much to be said about these racial politics of the book, like, the two white characters being from poor backgrounds and the two black characters being from well-off ones, and the way they always group together in pairs, and the way that one character struggles with his blackness, but is implicitly, okay, I have COVID, I can't get into this. There's also a lot about class dynamics. We both know that Willem comes from a poor background and Judy comes from this comically tragically impoverished background, but nobody in the book is working class. Like, poverty was something that's firmly located in the past. Even the side characters in this are assistant professors and small business owners and CEOs and doctors and biochemists. Like, nobody is a waiter for longer than it takes to become a superstar actor. That's just how it is. Anyways, so the first time I read this book, it was December 24th, 2021, and I know this because I was tweeting about it, and it was in the tub on Christmas Eve, and it ruined my holiday spirit so fucking bad. So, what I have to say is, yeah, it. I was kind of letting it glaze through my head this time more because I was afraid like all her self-indulgent bad writing habits would rub off on me if I like spent too much time absorbing it and want to spend my time creating and reading good fiction. Um, But the first thing I have to say about this book is that it's kind of like Self Harm the Musical, right? But it was like Icy Planet Barbarians, where there was like oral in the first chapter, where it was like, I didn't know you would how to do that. But the more recent time I read this, I was like much more jaded, and I was like, okay, well, this book has like 6, 7 parts. If it's the third section of the first part, so almost the second part, she actually showed restraint. She could have opened with it, and I wouldn't have put it past her. Um, So at that point, it's New Year's Eve. They're in their new apartment, and Willem gets woken up by Jude, who's like, "Can you take me to the hospital?" Now, the thing is, you get really graphic descriptions of self harm and its aftermath in this novel. Um, like, it was like she sat down. It was like, how can I most graphically and gorily evoke what that level of self harm would look like? And it's just the question of who does it serve? Because it doesn't serve anyone who self harms. So it's like almost definitionally for people who do not self harm, which you're beginning to see the voyeuristic nature, right? Right? Willem doesn't press Jude for answers. Um, and this is what I mean when I was like saying earlier that the book, these characters are mean to each other. Not because Willem is mean here, but because she tries to get very specific in their thoughts in a way I find very unrealistic. Well, not unrealistic per se. It's just I don't find it realistic. I don't find it unrealistic. I don't find it much of anything. I don't recognize anything in these things. The quote, you let things slide that your instincts told you not to. You scooted around the edges of your suspicions. You understood that proof of your friendship lay in keeping your distance and accepting what was told you and turning and walking away when the door was shut in your face instead of trying to force it open again. And to some extent, you go, okay, yeah, there are people you don't pry with. But there's a level to which this will go on for much longer than just that short excerpt I gave you. And she's waxing on at such length, you're like, you're not evoking anything to me. This may be a risk. All of you maybe go, oh, every friend group has that guy, laugh cry emoji, and I'll look like an idiot. But I'm gonna take a risk and say, like, if when you're faced with an entire book of prose and statements like that, at some point it's just so deeply alienating. You're like, I don't recognize these people. And maybe that's just because it's like Manhattan Alley, and it's because I don't live in New York. But whatever. So that's like the first kind of the yaoi modes we're getting into. You can really envision already the whole like Jude St. Francis needs a hug tag. Um, so let's get into the summary on Wikipedia just to make sure I'm not saving things. Um, he's apparently close with his friends, but he's unable to divulge either detail of his past or current state of mind to his roommate. But he thrives in law practice, develops a close parent-child relationship with his former professor Harold and his wife Julia, and later in the book they adopt him when he turns 30. So yeah, let's talk about Harold here. This book is entirely people trying desperately to save him. The only people who try to save him all die horribly, except for Harold, actually, because somebody has to find his dead body at the end or whatever. Well, I guess it wasn't even. Well, he didn't find it. He got called about it, but that's not the point. He says things to him like, quote, you see, Jude, in life, nice things happen to good people. You don't need to worry. They just don't happen as often as they should, but when they do, it's up to the good person to say thank you and move on. Like, blah, 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 blah. His whole thing is, wow, Jude, you are so good. You deserve good things. But because all of the people except for Harold who try to save him end up dying, or it's like something horrible happens every time he opens up, the book ends up having the feeling of being a cautionary tale about how if Lucy pulls the football out from Charlie Brown too many times in a row, he'll kill himself. And it's like, no, man, that's peanuts. Like, you leave Charlie Brown alone. And it's because of that I find the book malicious, because you read it and you're like, Hanya, you hate me. You want me to die. And then she gets in an interview and she's like, yeah, I do. That's not even that much of an exaggeration from what her interviews are like. Okay. While thankful, the time before the adoption was filled with further bouts of self-harm, as Jude believes he's inherently unworthy of affection. Yeah. The point of a lot of the different POVs, in my opinion, is that so most people can think you're so beautiful and you don't even know it. Like, it's a recurring thing in the novel. I'm so sick of it. Like, she calls it a fairy tale, but it's a shit fairy tale to me. And it's like nobody thinks anything uncharitable about him. No one. Because again, not realizing you're beautiful is not a negative thing to think about someone. Even the people who mock him so cruelly he falls out with them forever think he's the most beautiful person they've met, and they'd kill things to look like him. Like, what? It's stifling to read about. It's stifling because he's the main character of everybody else's lives too. And it's like, get a grip. Because no one is even mean to him for the right things. Nobody calls him a prissy cunt. Nobody says he isn't as smart as he thinks he is. No one ever says that he won't cop to that because he's scared of needing to offer something else other than his intelligence. Like, the problem with this book is that he's insecure about the wrong things. And I would have saved it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think saying those things about him would have been productive. I don't think anybody should have. But I am making the point that nobody did. Are these two related? We'll see. Okay, yeah, everyone becomes successful as the years pass. JB mocks Jude by doing an imitation of his disability, but this causes the group to cleave in two, with Willem siding with Jude and Malcolm trying to like be friends with everybody still. Okay, it's at this point that Jude gets a boyfriend. He's very private about his private life, and to the point where Willem, he's like 40, and Willem has no clue if he's gay or straight. And Jude's just like, sorry, man, some stuff's private. And it's like, okay, you guys have been best friends for 20 years, and okay, there's private and then there's private. At any rate, please don't call me queerphobic for saying that. He is engaged in relationships with men. The doctor who appears throughout the novel is one of his exes. Another one of his boyfriends is Caleb, who is a CEO who is abusive. So he's abusive both sexually, physically, verbally. But there was kind of stuck with me because there's this one speech he gives while he's being abusive. And he's like, he gets really mad at Jude for using a wheelchair because of his limp. And he's like, I told you my parents were sick for much of my adult life. My father had MS, and my mother, no one knew what she had. She got sick when I was in college and never got better. She had face pains, headaches. She was in a sort of constant low grade discomfort. And although I don't doubt it was real, what bothered me so much is that she never seemed to want to try to get better. She just gave up, as did he. And then, there's more of a tirade. And honestly, in the context of the novel, we are meant to read it as tirade by a manipulative abuser who is attempting to shame him for using the mobility aids he needs. I don't doubt that. I am not claiming that Hanya is using him as authorial mouthpiece. Yet, there is an element to which the novel seems to believe, yes, you should use your mobility aids and such. Yes, seeking out help can help you get better, except for the fact that like Caleb's mother, the novel also just seems to suggest that some people just give up and die, which is like kind of a troubling thing to validate in this, abuser's manipulations. And that's kind of the troubled relationship it has with the people who hurt Jude, is that because they tell him shit like, you're never going to get better, you're broken, this is the best you can do, and they turn out to be right, like, to some degree, it's just him being psychologically broken down for you to watch. And if you're into mind break yaoi, then you're into that. But again, I don't think that's like a literary genre. Okay, I'm gonna get called queerphobic for that again. But you know what I mean, right? It just has this very kind of, if you're not able to solidly repudiate the things these characters like Caleb say, unless part of your novel is about what happens when abusers are right about some things and not wrong about everything, but that's not really what the novel's about. So you kind of get these poison pills that you just take again and again over the course of reading the novel, which is another reason you take so much psychic damage reading the novel, because all of the victimizers in this novel are incredibly convincing given what you know about the characters and its facts. Okay, let's talk about him a little bit more, because I do think the treatment of disability in this novel is interesting. It's like, you can kind of eroticize the ableism at like the hands of this like problematic, sexy CEO Seme. Wait, I should say something. This may be controversial, but I feel like it's really easy to sexualize like forcing Seme into normalcy. So I'm coming at it from that perspective. I'm sorry if I sound bad for saying this, but it's just, specifically taking this tag is so feeling. Like, I can't believe this best sold. I have COVID. Leave me alone. It's bad. And of course, I want you to know that everything we see about the abuse is just on screen. This is the kind of book you couldn't make into a movie, not because it's too queer, too challenging, or whatever. I mean, they did make Call Me by Your Name or whatever, and then he fucked that peach. I just mean the sense that because so much of the book is about showing, not telling them. It's about showing, and if you can't show the acts themselves of what happens in the novel, the question is, what do you show? And that's also why my summary is very sparse, because I'm not going to tell you line for line, except for when I do, what goes down. Because the pornography is the point. Porn is a fair word, because basically, if this was made into a real life movie, it would be porn, and it would be highly illegal porn at that. So you're just kind of like, and again, I'm not saying it's bad this exists. It's just yet another reason it's Manhattan yaoi to me. And I feel like that's why we should talk about it in that register and critique it on that register, rather than giving it any sort of literary fig leaf. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The abuse culminates until basically Caleb humiliates him in front of his adopted father, brutally beats and rapes Jude, leaves him for dead. Jude refuses to report the incident to the police because he believed he deserved it. And so besides his adoptive father, only his doctor, his ex, know the truth. And although he physically manages to heal, this causes him to flash back to his childhood, wherein he underwent sexual abuse at the hands of the brothers in the monastery in which he lived, years of child prostitution, abuse within the state care once he was rescued by the police, And so, upon reflecting on all that, and after Caleb's abuse, he decides to attempt suicide, but survives. At this point, Willem comes back from where he's been living abroad as an actor and lives with him. Jude continues to refuse therapy, but he begins to tell Willem some what he thinks of as less tragic, but it is still incredibly like stuff about his childhood. The two begin a relationship, but Jude like just struggles to open up and doesn't enjoy a lot of the relationship stuff. Yeah, it's at this point that we cut to, him cutting so hard that we have to tell everyone what happens. Jude confesses that he doesn't enjoy sex. He confesses about, everything that happened to him. And he also explains to Willem that the damage to his legs was caused by a man named Dr. Trailer, who picked Jude up and held him captive while he cured him of venereal disease, assaulted him, and eventually ran him over with his car. The relationship continues. Willem tries sleeping with women, like they try to do a poly thing where he sleeps with women and not Jude until he stops because he feels guilty. So the two end up just like being fine with not having sex. But when his legs become worse and they have to amputate them, like it's kind of like they have a period of happiness where he's like learning to walk again, and everything seems like it's going to work out for him. We're going to take a pause here, and I'm going to talk about some stuff, commentary I have on stuff that happens in there. So, one, in response to how Harold sees him. Oh, I have a quote here where I saved this bit where Harold was talking about him. And I wanted to talk about it because to me it's really fascinating. Like, this is the idea. You have hundreds of pages of people describing him like this. Quote, "You asked me once when I knew he was for me, and he being Jude, and I told you I had always known. But that wasn't true, and I knew it even as I said it. I said it because it sounded pretty, like something someone might say in a book or movie, and because we were both feeling so wretched and helpless, and because I thought if I said it, we might feel better about the situation before us. The situation that perhaps would, oh, whatever, that's not even relevant. Anyway, the point is, and then he starts to wax poetic about how when he saw Jude, he thought, oh, he's so handsome, but he doesn't know it. Oh, he's so smart. Oh, like, you just get pages, but everyone describes him like this. It's exhausting. Because as it happens, the worst thing you can be, according to Hanya Yanagihara, is ugly. Yeah. Well, actually, no. Let me scratch. The worst thing you can do, according to her, is be fat. I feel like I have like obligation to mention this. If characters' weight on the heavier side rather than the skinnier side is mentioned, it is because she wants you to know that that person is unworthy of love. Like, it's a common theme between Two Paradise and A Little Life. Like, the only characters who are mentioned even vaguely positive are like JB's lesbian friends who appear as side characters, and one of them appears as the butt of a joke about like transition. Oh my god, I can't even get into this. Basically, my point is that if we care about you, you're skinny. Okay, and also beautiful. It's kind of like anime where like all the characters are sparkly and all the side characters are ugly in the background. See, exactly like yaoi. Even when they're happy, like it's kind of hard to take the sometimes the references to sad stuff, like stuff, one, because it's so off the top, but also two, like the main character, like Jude and Willem get compared to Frog and Toad. And Jude immediately gets insecure. He's like, I know I'm the Toad. I'm just horrible and I don't suit him just like a Toad. And it's like, one, why are you trying to sell me Dark Frog and Toad? And secondly, that was not the point of Frog and Toad. The point of Frog and Toad was not that Toad was unlovable. The point of Frog and Toad is they get along really well and they're really sweet. Why the fuck did you take that Toad is unlovable? Why don't you love Toad? He's a great... It's just like Dark Frog and Toad can stop eating cookies. Like, it's just not giving. And they do this for everything. Like, the Hildegard of Bingen, Hurt No Comfort, where, like, when he's describing his abuse at the hands of the brothers, and, he learned about this nun named Hildegard, and she had visions, but actually they focused on the instructor who lived in a small cell, and they just kind of bricked her in there, and Pavel, the brother, would always be like, that's what's going to happen to you. Like, is nothing sacred? Not even Hildegard of Bingen? My god. Anyways, let's get into what happens next. So the relationship continues with Willem sleeping... Oh, wait, I already said that. Sorry, I'm looking at Wikipedia right now. So yeah, however, while picking up Malcolm and his wife from the train station for a visit, Willem is involved in a car accident with a drunk driver which kills all three occupants. That's right. Malcolm, his wife, and Willem all get smashed to pieces in the course of one afternoon. And Jude once again descends into becoming extra skinny, and self-harm, and his remaining loved ones stage an intervention. They're able to get him to gain weight and attend therapy. Years of depression and despair finally overtake Jude, and he takes his own life. Yeah, that was what Wikipedia said. And it's really crazy because what happens is they kind of do a bait and switch on you. Is that you get this harrowing thing on how horrible his life is. Am I just too fucked up to live? Am I this? Am I that? And then, you know, he ends up deciding to get better, and the doctor's like, "You've come back. Like, it's not too late." Um, and he's like, "Yes, I've decided to stay." And then after this, it switches to Harold's POV. And if you skim it the way I did on my reread, you would be forgiven for thinking that he lives happily forever, because it's kind of like a blip and you miss it moment where he kills himself. And then it gets into everybody remembering him. And so for a second when I was skimming it, I was like, damn, did I get like a secret pirated copy of A Little Life with like the secret happy ending? But no, I was just like bad at reading in that moment because I was so ready to be done with it. Because basically what it is, quote, "But although I could never have imagined the person he would become for me, I knew how he would leave me. Despite all my hopes, pleas, insinuations, and threats and magical thoughts, I knew. And 5 months later, June 12th, the day with no significant anniversaries associated with it, a nothing day, he did." So the thing is, it's also very self-indulgent about his death. It's like literally like, oh, this is how he killed himself, and it must have hurt so bad, and he would have been in such pain, and he must have been so beautiful how he was doing it. Okay, that was me editorializing, but you know what I mean, right? You know what I mean. It's very juvenile fantasy, and again, I don't know why nobody at any point said, "Are you 14? Did you write this when you were 14?" The one final thing I want to talk about here is something else that Harold says during this ending postscript, whatever, where he says, "In those months, I thought often of what I was trying to do, of how hard it is to keep someone alive, someone who doesn't want to stay alive. First, you try logic. You have so much to live for. And then you try guilt. You owe me. Then you try anger and threats and pleading. I'm old, don't do this to an old man. But then, once they agree, it's necessary that you, the cajoler, move into the realm of self-deception. Because you can see that it is costing them. You can see how much they don't want to be here. You can see that the mere act of existing is depleting for them. And then you tell yourself every day, I'm doing the right thing. To let him do what he wants is to pour into the laws of nature, to the laws of love. You pounce upon the happy moments to try to hold them up as proof. See, this is why it's worth living. This is why I've been making him try. Even though that one moment cannot compensate for all the other moments, the majority of moments." You think, as I once thought with Jacob, what is a child for? Jacob was his first son, who passed and who he psychically replaced with Jude. Is he to give me comfort? Is he for me to give comfort to? If a child can no longer be comforted, is it my job to give him permission to leave? But then you think again, but that is abominable. I can't. And to me, that was the most telling, the idea that the happy moments with someone who you've convinced not to commit suicide do not outweigh their continued mental illness. Like, damn, okay. Anya, it's really bleak in there, and it's hard not to take away when this is at the close of the novel that is the whole point of the thing, that it is unethical to stop people from wanting to attempt suicide if their lives have been bad enough. Like, some people, there's people who have problems and there's people who really have problems. The problem, of course, with this that you may have noticed is that everybody, when you're in that headspace, is like, no, but I'm the one who really, really, really has problems. So what she decided to do was to make it so cartoonishly obvious that he has nothing at all to live for by devastating everything in his life. He becomes close to a social worker when he's younger. Kill her. Tragically. Her dying words are for him to open up. He doesn't. Okay, eventually he decides to open himself up to going on a date. Oh, that guy turns out to be an abuser. Like this, that. Like, it's just, and then he finds a forever lover. Boom. He gets tragically slain in a car accident by a drunk driver. Like, his childhood is horrible, but I mean, childhood sexual abuse does happen to people, so I'm not going to call that cartoonishly over the top. What I am calling cartoonishly over the top is this series of, Wile E. Coyote anvils fall on the head of anybody who does something nice for him. It's a little chilly, isn't it? A little life. Okay, that was my worst transition yet. In my defense, I have COVID, and that's the theme of this video, is that I have COVID. Thanks, everyone. Bye. I hope we all learned something new.